All right, I brought it up slowly with the current limiter, and the wall voltage keeps fluctuating between 126 and 128 here in Memphis. So I've got a Variac giving it about 110, 111, and that puts the heaters right about 6.3 volts. So that's a good starting point. I've got the bias about as cold as it's going to go. But we are getting cut out, and the screen supply keeps jumping around like it's a bad solder joint potentially beneath the board. So that's what I'm going to be investigating. The first thing I want to do is make sure I just don't have it biased so cold that it's in full cutoff. And where did my little screwdriver go? All right, I turned the bias up a little bit warmer and got more of a sound out of the amp. Let me turn the controls off. I'm having low voltages overall. The HT is at 403. And the screen node here, 392. And here, 392. So that's good, but it keeps fluctuating as I'm prodding this area. It's like there's a piece of solder in here or a bad solder joint floating around. So before I do anything else, I need to get the screw out, lift this up, maybe reflow some stuff, but the screen voltage keeps going between about 400 and about 200. And when the screen goes down, it draws all the preamp stuff down along with it. So that we're 277 and 363. So we got 363 on this phase inverter plate. We got 279 on the other. That's a crazy disparity. I think one of these is not actually drawing current. Yeah, 113 volts at this grid, 54 at this, 132 here. All the voltages here are off. Need to triple check the wiring. Make sure that that tube hasn't failed. But 363 is acting like it's just not conducting. That 278 is much more likely. So let me poke around in here and see what I find. All right, I've made 2 changes and I found one other issue. And many things are explained. First of all, I reflowed all these solder joints after I lifted this board, made sure there wasn't a blob of solder in there. And everything seems to be good. Everything measures continuity now. Second of all, I was a little concerned about the phase inverter. And I noticed that the connections at pins 4 and 5, those solder joints didn't look all that great. That might have been the cause. It turns out it was not, but I reflowed that. But remember I said I was getting all kinds of crazy measurements at this plate. So I measured these resistors, and this one's 102.4K. This one's 84.5, and you'd think that's great, but that's not 84.5K. That's 84.5 ohms. So, Ian, I'm afraid that you have been inducted into the Amp Tech Club. We have all been there. We have all had this initiation. You use an 82 ohm instead of an 82K, and all the problems I'm hearing or not hearing, so to speak, are caused by that. So let's take out this 82 ohm and put in 82K, and then we'll see where the amp's at. Skipping ahead a slight bit because I pressed pause when I thought I was pressing record and vice versa. So I missed a little bit. Got the 82K in there versus the 82 ohms, so that's good. Still had the cutout on the screen supply, and I've chased my tail with chokes in the past, because chokes rarely fail except when they just fail. And you look at everything else, and it's so quick to eliminate a choke, and it's just after that debacle with like 2 days chasing everything but the choke in an amp. Now, as soon as I suspect there might be a problem with the choke, I replace it. In this case, I just put in a 10 watt 470 ohm resistor. Now, that is not a critical value. It's not going out into the world like this. But now that that resistor has been changed out, the choke has been changed out for that resistor, I have on the plate, the HT, 394, The wall voltage has dropped down to 120. So we've got an artificially low voltage because I'm still using the Variac. That's just winter in Memphis. And so the ratio is what's important here. 394. And on the screen, 390. In both places on the actual physical screen. All right, so it's staying in the 390 range. It was going between 400 volts and 100 volts and getting a lot of static, and that was with that choke. So I've got a Mercury fender choke, I believe. If not, we can get one for the amp. The owner is certainly qualified to put a choke in. It's 2 screws and these 2 black wires. They go here and here. I'm not worried about that. Let's see where the phase inverter voltage is now that it has an 82K. This was like 360 and 275. This is now 205. This is now 204. That's all good. We have sound. All the voltages are correct. This was like 50 volts. This was like 100 volts before. Now both sides are about 50 volts. The cathode here is 71. It was in the hundreds. The tail is at 71. And then we got about 300 millivolts across that. So at this point, we are almost ready to hear what the amp sounds like. But I want to make sure we don't have any DC present at certain places on the board. So the volume's off. Let's measure the tone stack caps. I guess I'll show you that part. All right, so we want to have almost no voltage at any of these. So 2 millivolts, 0 millivolts, 0 millivolts. That's good. But that 2 is down now. Yeah, nothing. So no leakage on the board to the tone stack stuff. Let's check this cap here. Beautiful, about 6 millivolts. And here, about the same. At the input to the phase inverter, nothing. So we don't have any DC leakage, and I can see the flashing of the oscillator on the tremolo. So let's see if the pots are dirty. Start with the normal channel. Well, I've got a classic good news, bad news scenario. The good news is I no longer think anything's wrong with the choke. Though it's possible. The bad news is I know that something is very, very wrong with the output transformer. It was sounding okay, and then it started to do that zzz, zzz, zzz stuff. And there was that awful blocking sound, which really did sound like only half the output was working. But remember, I had not biased the amp yet. I had set it very, very cold, and I was correct in that. But I took some measurements, and when I first started to bias this, I measured 121.7 ohms on the primary here to center tap, and 81.9 ohms on this side. And that was a huge discrepancy, 127, 82. That's way more than you usually get. And then I kept measuring it because it kept getting weirder and weirder. And by the way, with that, let me get one more thing here on the calculator. All right, so with what I was getting across this, I initially measured, let me start this explanation again, sorry. So when I first biased this up, I measured 122 ohms on this primary to center tap and 82 ohms on this primary to center tap. And I started to set the bias, and then I took my DCR voltage reading, and I had 18.5 volts from this primary to center tap, and I had 1.19 from this primary to the center tap, which turned into 18.7%, like I said, the cold I intended. And then over here, it was at 196.1%, which would normally have killed that tube. That was not happening. The tube wasn't red plating or getting hot. And I said, what the hell? And I powered it off and I swapped the tubes to see if it followed the tube or the socket. And all of a sudden, instead of measuring 122 ohms from this primary to center tap, I'm measuring 25K. And I thought, well, maybe the socket has got a conductive path, so I disconnected the primary. From this primary up in the air to the center tap of the output transformer, I'm measuring 25K. The same measurement from the center tap to this primary, I'm still getting about 82 ohms, which is correct. So this side has almost failed as an open. And that was the resistance I was getting all that voltage drop across, not from the tube actually malfunctioning. So we have a bad output transformer. It's not the socket, it's not the tube. It is the physical primary it's having a problem on that side. So he needs a new output transformer. And I suspect that was pulling the screen down and that the choke is probably okay after all. Though it's weird that the problem seemed to go away once I put in this resistor rather than the choke. So it's possible he has a bad choke and a bad output transformer. And that's not a situation that anyone wants to be in. And he was hoping to go to Stacks and grab some lunch and come back and have a working amp for him. So I've got to give him a call and let him know that we have run into a major issue with this 65 Bandmaster. And I don't think that it's anything that he did in the work that he had done. As far as I know, he had not even powered this on after doing the work he did. And aside from that 82 ohm resistor, which could not have caused this, and aside from minor issues with that normal channel volume, which could not have caused this, everything else he did was just fine. So I think if he bought this amp, it might have not been disclosed. I don't know. I will talk to him, but this is where we stop for a moment. Some days you get lucky. I just happen to remember that I had an old Bandmaster output transformer in my stash of stuff. It's even from 65. It's not as pretty as this one, but it measures good. It measures 68 and 74 DCR on the primaries as opposed to 25K and 82 or whatever. So let me put this in place and see where we're at. Well, with the new old output transformer in, the 65, everything is biased nicely. I have an initial bias of about 48% idle, which is on the cool side, but that's with the resistor in place of a choke. Once I know that everything else is working, I'm going to put that choke back in place because I suspect it was that output transformer. Now, there's a very odd thing in that the polarity of the output transformer, the old and the new, does not match the schematic. The schematic's got blue and brown. Initially tried that, brought it up on a Variac and heard the squeal, turned it off. So brown, blue, no squeal. And it's black to ground and green to positive on the output transformer. So that's not where it's reversed, and it's not reversed at the grid connections. So I don't know what's up with that, but anyway, let's see how it sounds now. I'm going to start with the normal channel. That's all pretty good. I've already gone through and measured that there is no leaky DC anywhere on the board. So I was going to show all that, but this with the output transformer, this video already went a lot longer than I expected. And I've shown that in other videos. Let's see how the vibrato channel is doing. Well, that's promising. The stop here, I'm going to call the owner with the good news on the output transformer working, and then we'll take a look at that choke again.